But in the heat, Hector, Phoebus gave this temper. Do not meet, said he, in any single brave the man thou... Do not meet, said he, in any single brave the man thou threatenst, but impress and in thy strength impeach his violence, for far off or near his sword or dart will reach. The god's voice made a difference in Hector's own conceit betwixt his and Achilles' words, and gave such overweight as weighed him back into his strength and curbed his flying out. At all through his flying out. At all through fierce Iacides, and gave a horrid shout. The first of all he put to dart was fierce Iphitian. Was fierce Iphitian? Iphitian. Was fierce Iphitian. Was fierce Iphitian. Surnamed Otrantides. Haida. Jaegeus. Hyllus. Hermus. Horrid shout. The first of all he put to dart was fierce Iphitian. Iphitian. He put to dart was fierce Iphitian, surnamed Otrantides. I gotta check on that because all right, let's just let it stand. Iphitian, surnamed Otrantides, whom Neus. Iphitian, surnamed Otrantides. Iphitian, surnamed Otrantides, whom Neus the water nymph made son. Whom Neus the water nymph made son to town destroyer Otryntius. What was I thinking when I came up with these names? Otrynteus. All right. The water nymph made son to town destroyer Otrynteus. Beneath the snowy hill of Tmolus, in the wealthy town of Haida, at his will were many able men-at-arms. At his will were many able men-at-arms. He, rushing in, took full Hold on, let's check Tmolus. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Beneath the snowy hill of Tmolus, in the wealthy town of Haida, at his will, were many able men-at-arms. He, rushing in, took full Pelides' lance in his head's midst. Pelides' lance in his head's midst, that cleft in two his skull. Achilles knew him one much famed, and thus insulted then. Achilles knew him one much famed, and thus insulted then. And thus insulted then. All right, let's pull in some voices here. Achilles He's gonna see Hector in a little bit. He already did Aeneas. Maybe some of the gods. Let's just pull those two for now. Let us ask some prophet, priest, or prove some dream interpreter. Achilles knew him one much famed, and thus insulted him, and thus insulted then. Thou art dead, O Trentides. Thou art dead, O Trentides, though called the terriblest of men. Thy race runs at Gygeus Lake, there thy inheritance lay, near fishy Hylas. Hylas or Hylas? Hylas. O Trentides. Thus insulted then. Thou art dead, O Trentides. Thou art dead, O Trentides, though called. Thou art dead, O Trentides, though called the terriblest of men. Thy race runs at Gygeus Lake, there thy inheritance lay, near fishy Hylas and the gulfs of Hermus. But this day removes it to the fields of Troy. Thus left he night to seize his closed eyes. His body lay in course of all the priests. Thus left he night to seize his closed eyes. His body lay in course of all the priests, which Grecian horse broke with the strakes nailed to their chariot wheels. Next, through the temples, the burst eyes his deadly javelin steals of great in Troy Antenor's son, renowned Demoleon, a mighty turner of a field. His overthrow set gone Hippodamus, who leapt from a horse. Hippodamus, Demoleon, Iacides, Neptune. Okay. Mighty turner of a field. His overthrow set gone Hippodamus, who leapt from a horse, and as he fled before Iacides his turned back, he made fell Peleus gore, and forth he puffed his flying soul. And as a tortured bull to Neptune brought for sacrifice, a troop of youngsters pulled down to earth. And drag him round about the hallowed shore, to please the watery deity, with forcing him to roar, and forth he pours his utmost throat. So bellowed this slain friend of flying Ilion with the breath. Pours his utmost throat. So bellowed this slain friend of flying Ilion, with the breath that gave his being end. Then rushed he on, and in his eye had heavenly Polydore, old Priam's son, whom last of all his fruitful princess bore. Then rushed he on, and in his eye had heavenly Polydore, old Priam's son, whom last of all his fruitful princess bore, and for his youth, being dear to him, the king forbade to fight. Yet, hot of unexperienced blood, to show how exquisite he was of foot, for which of all the 50 sons he held the special name, he flew before the first heat of the field, even till he flew out breath and soul. Which, through the back, the lance of swift Achilles put in air, and did his The lance of swift Achilles put in air, and did his head advance out at his navel. On his knees the poor prince crying fell, and gathered with his tender hands the entrails that did swell quite through the wide wound, till a cloud as black as death concealed their sight, and all the world from him. When Hector had beheld his brother tumbled so to earth, his entrails still in hand, dark sorrow overcast his eyes. Not far off could he stand a minute longer, but like fire he brake out of the throng, shook his long lance at Thetis' son, and then came he along to feed the encounter. All right, let's check Hector. Impostor, woman mad, to feed the encounter. Oh, said he. Oh, wait, this is Achilles. Let us ask some prophet to feed the encounter. Actually, in this scenario, my Achilles might sound kind of like my Hector. Came he along to feed the encounter. Oh, said he, here comes the man that most of all the world destroys my mind, the man by whom I lost my dear Patroclus. Now not long the crooked paths of war can yield us any privy scapes. Come, keep off not so far. There's a weird typo in here with the quotation marks. Any privy scapes. Come, keep off not so far, he cried to Hector. Make the pain of thy sure death as short as one so desperate of his life hath reason. As one so desperate of his life hath reason. In no sort this frighted hath reason. In no sort this frighted Hector, who bore close and said, Iacchides, leave threats for children. I have power to thunder calumnies as well as others, and well know thy strength superior far to that my nerves hold. And well know thy strength superior far to that my nerves hold. But the gods, not nerves, determine war, and yet for nerves there will be found a strength of power in mine to drive a lance home to thy life. My lance, as well as thine, hath point and sharpness, and 'tis this. Thus, brandishing his spear, he set it flying, which a breath of Pallas. His spear he set it flying, which a breath of Pallas back did bear from Thetis' son to Hector's self, and at his feet it fell. Achilles used no dart, but close flew in, and thought to deal with no strokes but of sure dispatch, but what with all his blood he labored, Phoebus cleared with ease. But what with all his blood he labored, Phoebus cleared with ease, as being a god, and stood for Hector's guard, as Pallas did Iacchides for thine. He wrapped him from him, and a cloud of much night cast between his person and the point opposed. Achilles then exclaimed, O see, yet more gods are at work. Apollo's hand hath framed, dog that thou art, thy rescue now. To whom go pay thy vows, thy safety owes to him. I shall vent in time those fatal blows. I shall vent in time those fatal blows that yet beat in my heart on thine. And if any god remain, that yet beat in my heart on thine. I shall vent in time those fatal blows. I shall vent in time those fatal blows that yet... I shall vent in time those fatal blows that yet beat in my heart on thine. If any god remain my equal fautor. I think it's fautor. Fautor. If any god remain my equal fautor. If any god remain my equal fautor. If any god remain my equal fautor. In meantime, my anger must maintain. In meantime, my anger must maintain his fire on other Ilians. Then laid he at his feet great Demachus, Philetor's son, and Dryope did greet with like encounter. Dardanus and strong Laogonus, wise Bias' sons, he hurled from... Let's check these names. Dardanus, Demachus, Philetor, Dryope. Interesting. Laogonus. Bias. Tros. Alastor. Laogonus. Okay. On other Ilians. Then laid he at his feet great Demachus, Philetor's son. Philetor. Demachus. Laid he at his feet great Demachus, Philetor's son, and Dryope did greet with like encounter. Dardanus and strong Laogonus, wise Bias' sons, he hurled from horse. Of one victorious with his close sword, the other's life he conquered. Of one victorious with his close sword, the other's life he conquered with his lance. Then Tros, Alastor's son, made in, and sought to 'scape their chance with free submission. Down he fell, and prayed about his knees he would not kill him. To 'scape their chance with free submission. Down he fell, and prayed about his knees he would not kill him, but take ruth as one that destinies made to that purpose, being a man born in the self-same year that he himself was. Oh, poor fool, to sue to him to bear a ruthful mind. He well might know he could not fashion him in ruth's soft mold. He had no spirit to brook that interim in his hot fury. He had no spirit to brook that interim in his hot fury. He was none of these remorseful men, gentle and affable, but fierce at all times, and mad then. He gladly would have made a prayer, and still so hugged his knee he could not quit him, till at last his sword was fain to free his fettered knees, that made a vent for his white liver's blood, that caused such pitiful effects, of which it poured a flood about his bosom, which it filled, even till it drowned his eyes, and all sense failed him. Forth then flew this prince of tragedies, who next stooped Mullius even to death with his insatiate spear. One ear it entered, and made good his pass to the other ear. Mulius? Mulius. Interesting. Echeclus? Echeclus. Agenor. Deucalion. That's probably good for now. His insatiate spear. One ear it entered, and made good his pass to the other ear. Echeclus then, Agenor's son, he struck betwixt the brows, whose blood set fire upon his sword, that cooled it till the throes of his then laboring brain let out his soul to fixed fate. Let out his soul to fixed fate, and gave... Let out his soul to fixed fate, and gave cold entry to black death. To fixed fate, and gave cold entry to black death. Deucalion then had state in these men's beings, where the nerves about the... Deucalion then had state in these men's beings, where the nerves about the elbow knit, down to his hand his spear's steel pierced, and brought such pain to it as led death jointly, whom he saw before his fainting eyes, and in his neck felt with a stroke laid on, so that off flies his head. His fainting eyes, and in his neck felt with a stroke laid on, so that off flies his head. Felt with a stroke laid on, so that off fly, and in his neck felt with a stroke laid on, so that off flies his head. With a stroke laid on, so that off flies his head. One of the twice 12 bones that all the backbone make let out his marrow, when the head he helm and all did take, and hurled among the aliens. When the head he helm and all did take, and hurled amongst the aliens, the body stretched on earth. Rigmus of fruitful Thrace next fell. He was the famous birth of Pyrrhus. Rigmus. Pyrrhus. Areithous. Achilles. Okay. Stretched on earth. Rigmus. Stretched on earth. Rigmus of fruitful Thrace next fell. He was the famous birth of Pyrrhus. He was the famous birth of Pyrrhus. His belly's midst the lance took, whose stern force quite tumbled him from chariot. In turning back the horse, their guider, Areithous, received another lance that threw him to his lord. No end was put to the mischance Achilles entered. But as fire, fallen in a flash from heaven, inflames the high woods of dry hills. And with a storm is driven through all the sylvan deeps, and raves till down goes everywhere the smothered hill. So every way Achilles and his spear consumed the champaign. Champaign? Champion. That's not right. It's written P-A-I-N. I must have made a typo when I wrote that. Or this is a typo. I'll say champion because that's what it means. Either way. Goes everywhere the smothered hill. So every way Achilles and his spear consumed the champions. The black death flowed. The champions. The black earth flowed with the veins he tore. And look how oxen, yoked and driven about the circular floor of some fair barn, tread suddenly the thick sheaves thin of corn. Of some fair barn, tread suddenly the thick sheaves thin of corn, and all the corn consumed. The thick sheaves thin of corn, and all the corn consumed with chaff, so mixed and overborne beneath Achilles' one-hoofed horse shields. Beneath Achilles' one-hoofed horse, shields, spears, and men lay trod. His axle trees and chariot wheels all spattered with the blood hurled from the steeds' hooves. Hurled from the steeds' hooves and the strakes. Thus to be magnified, his most inaccessible hands, in human blood he died. Thus to be magnified, his most inaccessible hands, in human blood he died. His most inaccessible hands, in human blood he died. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's book 21. Or rather, book 20. Now we move to book 21, and I already have a pronunciation guide for that. This is file number... Okay, we don't need that anymore. Actually, no, this is wrong. I gotta... Okay, book 20 ended around 30 minutes. Okay. And we don't need any other stuff here. One, two, three, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inaccessible hands, in human blood he died. Book 21. Book 21. Book 21. Book 21. Argument. 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 In 2 ways Troy's host parted. Thetis' son, one to Scamander. Thetis' son, one to Scamander, one to Ilion pursues. 12 lords he takes alive, to end in sacrifice for vengeance to his friend. Takes alive to end in alive, to end in sacrifice for vengeance to his friend. Asteropaeus dies by his fierce hand, and Priam's son, Lycaon. Over land the flood breaks where Achilles being engaged. Vulcan preserves him, and with spirit enraged sets all the champions and the flood on fire. And the flood on fire. Contention See, this is also Pain. This has to be that I wrote this wrong. An archaic and literary term used from the 15th century referring to a flat, open, or level expanse of countryside. I wrote this wrong and then wrote the wrong pronunciation of it because of that. It's pronounced like champagne. Okay. It's written here as AIGN, but it has to be the same word. With spirit enraged, sets all the champagne and the flood on fire. Like, he sets all the land. Okay. I am going to delete that one. Champagne. And I'll have to mark that. Well, I'll notice it when I'm doing the checks, I guess. That when I said it previously, it was wrong. Yeah, I'll have to mark that later. Achilles being engaged. Over land the flood breaks where Achilles being engaged. Vulcan preserves him, and with spirit enraged sets all the champagne and the flood on fire. Contention then doth all the gods inspire. Apollo in Agenor's shape doth stay Achilles' fury, and by giving way makes him pursue, till the deceit gives leave that Troy in safety might her friends receive. Till the deceit gives leave that Troy in safety might her friends receive. Apollo in Agenor's shape doth stay Achilles' fury, and by giving way makes him pursue, till the deceit gives leave that Troy in safety might her friends receive. Another argument. Phi at the flood's shore doth express the labors of Iacides. I'm not going to force that rhyme. Phi at the flood's shore doth express. Phi at the flood's shore doth express the labors of Iacides. And now they reached the goodly swelling. And now they Book 21. Book 21. And now they reached the goodly swelling channel. And now they reached the goodly swelling channel of the flood, gulf-eating Xanthus, whom Jove mixed with his immortal brood. And there Achilles cleft the host of Ilion. One side fell on Xanthus, the other on the town, with his immortal brood. And there Achilles cleft the host of Ilion. Achilles cleft the host of Ilion. One side fell on Xanthus, the other on the town, and that he did impel the same way that the last day's rage put all the Greeks in rout when Hector's fury reigned. On the town, and that he did impel the same way the last day's rage put all the Greeks in rout when Hector's fury reigned. These now Achilles poured about the scattered field. To stay the flight, Saturnia cast before their hasty feet a standing fog, and then the flight's violence bore. A standing fog, and then flight's violence bore the other half full on the flood. Standing fog, and then flight's violence bore the other half full on the flood. The silver gulfed deep received them with a mighty cry. The billows vast and steep roared. The billows vast and steep roared at their armors, which the shores did round about resound. Which the shores did round about resound. This way and that they swum and shrieked, as in the gulfs they drowned. This way and that they swum and shrieked, as in the gulfs they drowned. This way and that they swum and shrieked, as in the gulfs they drowned. And as in fired fields locusts rise, as the unwearied blaze plies still their rising, till in swarms all rush as in a maze for scape into some neighbor flood. And so the Achillean stroke here drave the foe. Achillean stroke here drave the foe. The gulfy flood with men and horse did choke. Then on the shore the worthy hid, and left his horrid lance amid the tamarisks, and sprite-like did with his sword advance up to the river. Ill affairs took up his furious brain for Troy's. Ill affairs took up his furious brain for Troy's engagements. Every way he doubled slain on slain. Every way he doubled slain on slain. A most unmanly noise was made with those he put to sword of groans and outcries. Unmanly noise was made with those he put to sword of groans and outcries. The flood blushed to be so much engorged. The flood blushed to be so much engorged with such base souls. And as small fish the swift-finned dolphin fly, filling the deep pits in the ports, on whose close strength they lie, and here he swallows them in shoals. They lie, and there he swallows them in shoals. So here to rocks and holes about the flood the Trojans fled, and there most lost their souls, even till he tired his slaughterous arm. 12 fair young princes then he chose of all to take alive, to have them freshly slain on that most solemn day of wreak resolved on for his friend. These led he trembling forth the flood, as fearful of their end as any hind calves. All their hind hands he pinioned behind with their own girdles worn upon their rich weeds. And resigned their persons to his myrmidons to bear to fleet. And he plunged in the stream again to fleet. And he plunged in the stream again to take more work of tragedy. he met, then issuing the flood, with all intent of flight, Lycaon, Dardan Priam's son, whom lately in the night he had surprised, as in a wood of Priam's he had cut. In the night he had surprised, as in a wood of Priam's he had cut the green arms of a wild fig tree. As in a wood of Priam's he had cut the green arms of a wild fig tree, to make him spokes to put in naves of his new chariot. And ill then, all unthought, stole on him in Achilles' shape, who took him thence and brought to well-built Lemnos, selling him to famous Jason's son, from whom a guest then in his house, Imbrius Eetion, let's just check some of these names. Imbrius Eetion. Lycaon. All right, good. Arisba, Pluto, Achilles, Ilians, Lemnos. Okay, we're good. To famous Jason's son, from whom a guest then in his house, Imbrius Eetion, redeemed at high rate, and sent home to Arisba, whence he fled, and saw again his father's court. To Arisba, whence he fled, and saw again his father's court. 11 days banqueted amongst his friends. The 12th, God thrust his hapless head again in the hands of stern Aeacides, who now must send him slain to Pluto's court, and 'gainst his will. Him when Achilles knew, naked of helmet, shield, sword, lance, all which for ease he threw to earth, being overcome with sweat and labor wearying his flying knees, he stormed and said, let us ask some prophet, priest. He stormed and said, O heaven, a wondrous thing invades mine eyes. O heaven, a wondrous thing invades mine eyes. Those Ilians that heretofore I slew rise from the dark dead quick again. This man fate makes a stew of her own steel fingers. He was sold in Lemnos, and the deep of all seas twixt this Troy, and that many a man doth keep from his loved country, bars not him. Come then, he now shall taste the head of Peleus, and try if steel will down as fast as other fortunes, or kind earth can any surer seize on his sly person, whose strong arms have held down Hercules. His thoughts thus moved while he stood firm, to see if he spied would offer flight, which first he thought, but when he had descried, he was descried, and flight was vain. One, two, three. But when he had descried, he was descried, and flight was vain. Fearful he was descried, and flight was vain. Fearful he made more nigh, with purpose to embrace his knees, and now much longed to fly his black fate and abhorred death by coming in. His foe observed all this, and up he raised his lance as he would throw, and then Lycaon, his black fate and abhorred death by coming in. His foe observed all this, and up he raised his lance as he would throw. And then Lycaon close ran in, fell on his breast, and took Achilles' knees, whose lance on earth now stayed, did overlook his still turned back. With thirst, still turned back, with thirst to glut his sharp point with the blood that lay so ready. With the blood that lay so ready. But that thirst Lycaon's thirst withstood to save his Lycaon's thirst withstood, but that thirst Lycaon's thirst withstood to save his blood. Achilles' knee in one hand he knit, the other held he the long lance hard, and would not part with it, but thus besought. All right, we need a Lycaon voice. Well, it's been a while since we had a new voice, because most of them are established already. All right, this is 49. I kiss thy knees, divine Aeacides. Respect me. Part with it, but thus besought. Would not part with it, but thus besought. I kiss thy knees, divine Aeacides. I kiss thy knees, divine Aeacides. Respect me, and my fortunes rue. I now present the excess of a poor suppliant for thy ruth, and I am one that is worthy thy ruth, O Jove's beloved. First hour my miseries fell into any hand, 'twas thine. I tasted all my bread by thy gift since. Oh, since that hour, I tasted all my bread by thy gift since. Oh, since that hour thy surprisal led. By thy gift since. Oh, since that hour that thy surprisal led from forth the fair wood my sad feet, far from my loved allies, to famous Lemnos, where I found 100 oxen's prize to make my ransom, for which now I thrice the worth will raise. This day makes 12 since I arrived in Ilion, many days being spent before in sufferance, and now a cruel fate thrusts me again, being spent before in sufferance, and now a cruel fate thrusts me again into thy hands. I should haunt Jove with hate that with such set malignity gives thee my life again. There were but 2 of us for whom Laothoe suffered pain. Laothoe, old Altes' seed, Alte, whose palace stood in height of Upper Pedasus, near Satnius silver flood, and ruled the warlike Lelagi. Might as well start checking names. Laothoe, Satnius, I don't have one for Alti. Altes was a Lelegian king who resided at Pedasus. Okay, it doesn't say his Greek pronunciation, though. Altes, altes, aletes. This is not the same thing. This is not the character. It's not the same. I'm going to say it's altes. There's no pronunciation. I don't have a Greek version of the book with me right now. Alti. Okay. Oh, Lelagi. Lelagi. So I got that one. Polydor. Priam. Hector, Polydor, Hector. All right, we're good. In height of Upper Pedasus, near Satnius river flood, and ruled the warlike Lelagi, whose seed as many suffered pain, Laothoe, old Alte's seed. Alte, whose palace stood in height of Upper Pedasus, near Satnius silver flood, and ruled the warlike Lelagi, whose seed as many more King Priam married, and begot the godlike Polydor, and me, accursed, the godlike Polydor, and me, accursed. Thou slaughterest, begot the godlike Polydor, and me, accursed. Thou slaughterest him, and now thy hand on me will prove as mortal. Thy hand on me will prove as mortal. And now thy hand on me will prove as mortal. I did think, when here I met with thee, I could not scape thee. Yet give ear, and add thy mind to it. I told my birth too intimate, though one sire did beget, yet one womb brought not into light. Yet one womb brought not into light Hector that slew thy friend and me. Oh, do not kill me then, but let the wretched end of Polydor excuse my life. For half our being bred brothers to Hector, he half paid, no more is forfeited. For half our being bred brothers to Hector, he half paid, no more is forfeited. Thus sued he humbly, but he heard with this austere reply. Let us ask some prophet, priest, or prove. But he heard with this austere reply. Fool, urge not ruth nor price to me, till that solemnity, resolved on for Patroclus' death, pay all his rights to fate. Till his death to fate. Pay all his rights to fate. Till his death I did grace to Troy, and many lives did rate at price of ransom. But none now of all the brood of Troy, whoever Jove throws to my hands, shall any breath enjoy that death can beat out, specially that touch at Priam's race. Die, my friend, what tears are these? What sad looks spoil thy face? Touch at Priam's race. Die, my friend, what Priam's race. Die, Priam's race. Die, die, my friend. What tears are these? What sad looks spoil thy face? Patroclus died, that far past thee. Nay, seest thou not beside myself, even I, a fair young man and rarely magnified? Beside myself, even I, a fair young man and rarely magnified, and to my father being a king, and mother that have sits in rank with goddesses. And yet, when thou hast spent thy spirits, death and as violent a fate must overtake even me. Death and as violent a fate must overtake even me. Death and as violent a fate must overtake even me. By twilight, mornlight, day, high noon, whenever destiny sets on her man to hurl a lance or knit out of his string an arrow that must reach my life. Out of his string an arrow that must reach my life. An arrow that must reach my life. An arrow that must reach my life. This said, a languishing Lycaon's heart bent like his knees, yet left him strength to advance both hands for mercy as he kneeled. His foe yet leaves his lance, and forth his sword flies, which he hid in furrow of a wound driven through the jointure of his neck. Flat, a wound driven through the jointure of his neck. Flat fell he, which he hid in furrow of a wound driven through the jointure of his neck. Driven through the jointure of his neck. Flat fell he on the ground, stretched with death's pangs, and all the earth imbrued with timeless blood. Then gripped Iacides his heel, and to the lofty flood flung, swinging his unpitied course, to see it swim and toss upon the rough waves, and said, Go feed the fat fish. Go feed fat the fish with loss of thy left blood. They clean will suck thy green wounds, and this saves thy mother tears upon thy bed. Deep Xanthus on his waves shall hoist thee bravely to a tomb that in her burly breast the sea shall open, where great fish may keep thy funeral feast with thy white fat, and on the waves dance at thy wedding fate, clad in black. Thy wedding fate, clad in black horror, clad in black horror, keeping close inaccessible state. Clad in black horror, keeping close inaccessible state. So perish Ilians, till we pluck the brows of Ilion down to her feet. You flying still, I flying still upon, thus in the rear. And as my brows were forked with rabbit horns, toss ye together. This brave flood that strengthens and adorns your city with his silver gulfs, to whom so many bulls your zeal hath offered, with blind zeal his sacred current gulls, with casting chariots and horse, quick to his prayed for aid. Quick to his prayed for aid shall nothing profit. His prayed for aid shall nothing profit. Perish then, till cruelest death hath laid. Perish then, till cruelest death hath laid all at the red feet of revenge for my slain friend. Perish then, till cruelest death hath laid all at the red feet of revenge for my slain friend, and all with whom the advance of my hands, and all with whom the and all with whom the absence of my hands made yours a festival. With whom the absence of my hands made yours a festival. With whom the absence of my hands made yours a festival.